Welcome to the show, folks. This is Wrestling Changed My Life. Here we go.
I know there's a famous quote by Dan Gable, after wrestling, everything else is easy. I would actually strongly disagree with that.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, wrestling is tough. It's very, very tough. But med school is tough too. It's a different animal.
We can endure anything and adapt and pivot and change. Wrestling gave us that ability.
I would say nothing in life has impacted me more than the things wrestling has taught me in terms of self-reflection, resilience.
Toughness. Some guys have it, some guys don't.
Adversity, 100%. How to pick myself up and be a man after I failed.
And everything that has shaped my life and where I'm at today would not be there without the values and basically the lessons I've learned through the sport of wrestling.
For me, wrestling saved my life because it allowed me to focus and channel my energy.
We're fortunate if you wrestled, because if you wrestled, natural talent helps, but it's 5% of the ingredient. It pales in comparison to heart and technique and effort.
It humbled me, taught me humility. Nothing can humble you more than wrestling. I think it's the learning to adapt, right? You learn how to adapt, you learn how to solve problems.
You know, if I look back at my time I spent wrestling, if it gave me one thing more than anything else, it's mental toughness.
Welcome to the show, folks. This is Wrestling Changed My Life. My guest today is Dr. Eric Tannenbaum. Eric Tannenbaum, let me tell you, was an Illinois legend. 4-time finalist, 3-time champ. His only loss came in the finals his sophomore year, and trust me, we talk about that, because it was one of the biggest upsets in Illinois history. He went on to be a 4-time All-American at Michigan, and then went on to Michigan Medical School. Really enjoyed the conversation. I hope you do as well. Fan of the Week goes to Pat Pithen. He's a sales specialist out in Urbandale, Iowa for Document Solutions. Thank you so much for the support, Pat. We appreciate it. This episode is brought to you by Gable the GOAT Part 2, which is a documentary podcast on Dan Gable, believe it or not. Part 2 covers the years 1987 through 1993. You'll hear from Tom Ryan, Tom Brands, Lincoln McElravy, Troy Steiner. That's episode 110, so give it a listen and let us know what you think. We love doing the documentaries here, and we'll be doing more of them. For latest updates from the show, please go to WrestlingChangeMyLife.com. And that's it, folks. Let's give it up for the doc, Eric Tannenbaum. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're here with Dr. Eric Tannenbaum. How are you, sir?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I love talking wrestling, and I got to say, though, man, this morning about 8 a.m., I had a little wave of sadness because I was seeing all the posts about the Nationals, and I had to cancel my flights, and it got real that we weren't going to the Nationals this year, man. It's been a crazy time. Do you usually go?
I actually have not been since the last time I competed, but it's just been because I've always been crazy busy. I've always been trying to get back to there. Eventually that's the goal and the plan, and I think it's going to be awesome when I do. I guess it's a good thing I didn't plan that for this year, but it's been all these years I've been in training, so I kind of been stuck at the mercy of whatever program I've been training, and it's hard to get time off, but I'll probably try to go next year.
Man, you said it, though, with your time management. I mean, just going down the rabbit hole, everyone knows your story. You're a doctor, academic, All-American, wrestling All-American, just the model student athlete, so to speak. I'm sure you cringe when people say that. But before we get to Michigan and before we get to your medical practice now, I want to go way back to the beginning because I graduated high school in 2007. And so you had already left by that point in time, but man, the stories of you and Brian Dyer and that whole crew, I mean, those were some awesome classes of Illinois wrestlers. So let's go back to the very beginning, man. When did wrestling hook you, and how'd you get into it?
So I started out kind of doing every sport. So my dad had me in soccer. I was in karate. I was in a little bit of everything. And then, in soccer, I kept getting red cards, and I was a little too physical, and so my dad thought it'd probably be a good idea to get me into something like karate, but then karate, you weren't able to actually strike anyone at that age. So probably when I was about 8 years old, he signed me up for, it was actually Naperville Central Wrestling Club. So I went down there, and he said, I brought you in soccer, and we bought you cleats and all these shin guards and everything, and you didn't end up I finished out the years and everything, but I didn't end up staying with it. And I did karate and same thing. So he said, I want to make sure that you stick this out. So I started wrestling really in socks for the first 6 months, which is kind of funny thinking about it now. And I started out at the Naperville Central Wrestling Club. And then that's actually where I met Brian Dyer. And then from there, I don't know exactly how he met Israel Martinez, but I remember we would go to these tournaments, and we weren't any good, at the beginning. I think Dyer he'd been wrestling a couple years, so he's a lot better than me. But we would see Israel Martinez there and Nathan Martinez, and they were just killing kids, and it was just crazy. So somehow, I don't know how, but Brian Dyer and his dad got in with the Martinezes, and they invited him over to East Aurora High School to start kind of wrestling there. And then because we were good friends with the Dyers, they invited us, and then it became the routine where we were going over there. And in the beginning, it was just Israel Martinez, Nathan Martinez, me, Brian Dyer, Roberto Torres, Ruben Villarreal. There was just kind of a handful of us, and we would just go in and practice, and it was intense, but it was great training. A lot different than kind of anything else you'd seen really at that time. There were no wrestling clubs. There was no Izzy style wrestling. There was no even Fox Valley wrestling. There was no overtime wrestling. None of that stuff really existed at the time. It was just basically, I think probably like Blair Academy. There were a handful around the country, but certainly nothing around us.
Just kind of like your local rec club pretty much at that time.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't even a club. It was just, Jose Martinez was the head wrestling coach of East Aurora High School, and afterwards he would train his kids and whoever else wanted to come in. I mean, it literally was, there was no membership, there were no membership fees. It was just open room. Whoever wanted to come in and train with, some tough kids from Aurora was welcome to come on in. So it was really pretty old school, kind of cool actually thinking about it, reflecting back on kind of compared to now how everything is also structured and there's club payments and club memberships. It was really pretty primitive at the time, but that was kind of the cool thing about it.
Definitely. And had your family, do you have any brothers or sisters, and did your family have any experience with wrestling, or did you guys just kind of realize 20 years later that you were in the hands of a true master in Jose Martinez, and it just kind of worked out that way?
So my dad wrestled in high school for a few years. He always tells a story about how he got into some big fight with his coach and kind of ended up quitting more out of frustration and spite. But nobody else in my family wrestled. I have a sister who's a couple years older than me, and she's actually an 8th grade English teacher right now. But obviously she wasn't into it. So it was kind of, my dad did a little bit of it, and he was really, he loved it, and he got really into it, knows he can recall every single score of every match and every little thing that happened. It's kind of crazy. I mean, if you ask him about anything, he would know it. So he loved it, and he told me it was, a great ride for him, especially, thinking about all the different stages between starting with the Martinezes and then stuff that happened in high school and then going on to college. So it was, I think it was definitely a good ride for both of us.
What a journey. And how old were you when you say you met the Martinez family?
So it was pretty early on. So I was probably maybe 10 or 11. I was young. I mean, that was, like I said, that was when we just started a few years in and started going over there. And that's when all of a sudden started kind of getting pretty good. And it was kind of funny because I remember the first tournament that I went to, I think it was called the War Horse. It was the first tournament where I actually, did anything that was of any significance. I won the tournament and I beat Charles Lloyd in the finals.
God.
And
That's an old
Jose
name.
Martinez. Yeah, and so Jose Martinez, after I beat him, looked at me. He's like, "Do you know who that was?" So that started happening more and more. Like I went to the Tournament of Champions, and I don't remember. I think this is the stuff I'm not really. I have a terrible memory of all the little details, but I think it might have been Ryan Needle, or it was might have been Jaggers. It was a named person at the time that I wrestled in the finals, and I beat him. And everybody at that tournament was like, "You know who your son just beat?" I think it might have been Ryan Needle, who was, I think, a multiple-time state champ in New York at the time. So things like that kind of happened more and more as we were just training in this small group of people with the Martinezes and whoever else wanted to come on in. There was no, there was no politics. There was no, I mean, it was all just basically who wants to come in this tough gym and train with these people at this time, show up.
And for the folks who aren't from Illinois, the names we're throwing around, Nathan and Izzy Martinez, Brian Dyer, obviously in addition to yourself, but those three alone, like, you might not even have been the best guy in the room on a given night. Like, you might not have gotten the best of any of those guys. That's how good those dudes were. I mean, was that what it was like for a while, just scrapping and just trying to stay alive? And the room was so tough that you'd go out and beat guys at the tournaments, and it was like, yeah, that's good and all, but the room is so freaking tough.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, the surprising thing about all this probably is that for whatever reason, I ended up going on to college and kind of doing more, I would say, in college than any of those guys. But at the time, I mean, it was just kind of how things worked out, because at the time, a lot of the guys in that room were kicking my ass,
Right.
So I think, Israel, I would be lucky if I got a takedown on in an entire practice, and it would kill me. It was so frustrating. And then, even some of the other names like Ruben Villarreal, I don't think he even wrestled in college, but that guy was just crushing me. It was, so I think that's kind of the best way in wrestling, as everyone knows, to get better, is to go in a room where you're going to get your ass kicked as much as you can, as long as you can stand it mentally to keep coming back.
Absolutely. And when would you say you realized that your work ethic and your drive was unique and that you were just all in? Like, wrestling had hooked you, you were 100% in. When did that happen for you?
I would say when I started having those big wins, because that's what I think in wrestling is a big drive, is you push, and then all of a sudden you beat somebody that nobody thought you'd beat, and people start looking at you and wondering, who's this guy, And so I think as soon as we started getting some of those big wins and winning some big state and national tournaments, and then it just kind of rolled from there. It was just like an addiction. You wanted to just keep getting better and keep finding bigger people to try to go after and beat.
And what was the tournament schedule like back then? Was there tournaments in the spring and summer? Or was it just wrestling with Jose? And I've even heard stories from Nathan of Jose didn't have mats at his house, but just carpet and like stacks of carpet in his garage, and they'd be drilling on the carpet.
Yeah.
I mean, so were you over there in the summers doing that kind of stuff?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we were. I mean, I was Israel and Nathan, and I would hang out with them all the time, and we would. That was our main group, and we found tournaments. I mean, there were definitely tournaments, Great Lakes. I mean, tournaments that I don't even know if it even existed anymore. There was a Great Lakes tournament. There was, of course, all the different Northern Plains tournaments, freestyle, Greco. I mean, we were finding there was some crazy outdoor tournaments where I remember the mats were so hot because it was in the middle of summer. They had to keep wiping them down. It was ridiculous. But I mean, we would find tournaments all over the state and country and just go to them. Like I said, we would try to find people that would that could beat us. And honestly, at some point in time, it was, my dad always jokes that he felt like it was like rolling into a place, opening a van, letting a bunch of pit bulls out. We'd go out, we'd just tear it up and come back in with the trophies.
Let's go.
For a long time, it was kind of, we basically rode around dominating. I mean, it was, I can count on probably one hand. I remember the times Israel lost. And then when he lost, it was like stunning. I mean, I can't even remember. I don't remember him really losing.
How fucking good was Izzy Martinez in his prime, dude?
He was good. Yeah, I mean,
like, just ridiculous. That's the thing. I don't think.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't know that people really realize it. And I mean, like I said, obviously everybody knows the story. He didn't end up going to college and doing the thing that he probably could have done, but that was just. And I mean, he's pretty open about it. That was just how some things turned out, and some decisions made here or there that may have not been ideal. But yeah, in his prime, I mean, he was unstoppable. And the thing about it is that, he would be out this is the thing that people didn't understand. I mean, we were young, but he would be out even in junior high and high school, just out up in the middle of the night, joking around, doing different, whatever. Would get a few hours of sleep and go wake up the next morning, make weight, and then win a national title at whatever national tournament we were at. Jeez. I mean, that's how good he was. My dad had me in bed at 8 p.m. and Israel would always be laughing. He's like, "Hey, just leave him alone." They used to call me Rock. That was my nickname. So like, leave Rock alone. Let him just, he needs to sleep. He needs to get his rest. My dad was very serious about it. I was in bed at 7:30 or 8. even if I was laying in bed for 3 hours, and then he'd have me up in the morning, and those guys would be up playing cards or joking around, whatever, until 1 a.m, go out and just kill everyone. So it was a totally different level, in my opinion. More, a higher level than I've seen for a lot of people.
I mean, did he ever lose in high school?
I think he slammed someone. That was it. So no.
Yeah.
He had zero. I don't even think he was ever close to losing in high school.
I mean, in between you guys, think about IKWF. I think he won IKWF like 5 times. Brian Dyer won 4 times. You won 3 times. I mean, that's a phenomenal group, and it's just amazing how all that came together. When did Fox Valley and the Spanglers get involved? How did that all come about?
So my dad was always trying to get Jose to kind of make it a more formal thing, because he just, at the end of the year, they would always give him like a thank you card with some money in it or whatever as a thank you appreciation thing. And Jose never wanted to take it. He said, "I love doing what I'm doing. I love training your kids, whatever." But I think it was the right thing to do. He was putting tons of time and effort, and he was doing something that was great, and changed a lot of these people's lives if I had never met them, who knows, I have no idea. I wasn't like some phenom. It wasn't like I had this amazing talent. So basically for years, Jose never wanted to take a dime from anybody. He just did it because this is how we do it, and this is what I want to do. And I just train my kids. You're welcome to join, whatever, if you want to put effort into it. And then eventually, with, I don't remember specific details of how Spangler became involved or who introduced him or how any of that happened, but eventually Spangler he got involved, and between the Benefields, my dad, and Spangler, they kind of convinced him to start this Fox Valley wrestling thing, which he was really reluctant to do. But then once he started it, it really started to bring in a lot of different people, and it really kind of made it more structured. And then with more structure, then you could build it as a team, and then the team obviously was going around and we were winning a lot of different tournaments. So and I think then it kind of became a permanent thing for him, which I think he enjoyed doing for a long time.
And I always wondered, where did the Fox Valley Club practice? Did you guys have your own facility?
No, it was really the same thing. That's the funny thing about it. It was just the name, but we were mainly at East Aurora, and then sometimes we would go over to, it was just different areas. Like I think when Kukla opened, sometimes they were going over there, but for the most part, at least in the very beginning, for the majority of the time I was there, nothing really changed other than the name. But people were coming from all over to go to, this really, East Aurora, I don't know if you've ever been in that high school, but it's, there's
pretty rough,
graffiti
right?
all over the there's graffiti all over the wrestling mats. There was, I don't know if he was joking or serious, but I think he was serious. Jose would always say, check your shoes because there might be cockroaches in there. I think he was serious. There was bullet holes. There was bullet holes in the windows in the wrestling room. And then when you'd enter the high school, I'd say every other week, probably the front door was smashed out. It was crazy. From a kid from Naperville, right? From a kid from Naperville, it was crazy. But I guess if you grew up in that area, I don't know if that's your norm, but for me, it was definitely not. That's not Naperville North High School. I can tell you that.
When you think of, again, people who are not from Illinois have no idea what we're talking about, but I don't care because I grew up during this era when the split happened, then it became Martinez Fox Valley, then the Spanglers were doing their thing, and Jose was doing his thing, and this was big drama back in the IKWF days, and that team, the Fox Valley team, in like probably 2001, 2000, maybe even before that. Actually, it's probably the 90s when like Benefield was there. Before the split happened, one of the most dominant teams ever at the kids level. We're talking several multiple-time Illinois state champions all in one club, and the fact that all those rich cats from Naperville were traveling to East Aurora, I had no idea that's how it was.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, it was pretty much, it was me, Brian Dyer, and then Nick Fanthorpe were pretty much the people coming from Naperville. So I guess you say Benefield, but he wasn't.
Well, Spanglers, aren't they from Naperville?
Yeah, I think is he from Naperville? I think
might have been
from Naperville, yeah.
Quite a bit younger too than when
or somewhere, yeah.
So
yeah.
we'll
Either
move
way,
on.
they were definitely from an affluent area, that's for sure.
Definitely, to say the least. And so that's kind of the foundation you grew up with. One of the best Illinois coaches of all time. you'll never hear his name mentioned in that conversation, but people from Illinois know that Jose Martinez was one of the great coaches of all time. And if you went to any of those camps or clubs in the summer, like I was from a small farm town, and we used to get nervous wrestling Chicago kids and had a confidence issue, but you'd hang out with Jose for a while up there and you felt confident. You just instilled that in you. I love that going up there. And Betty, rest in peace. She was the sweetest and was like just a wrestling mom for the whole state. So what a great family. And then so you go, you do really well in middle school. When did you come in contact with Sean Bormet? How old were you when that all happened?
So the first time I ever heard Sean Bormet's name was my sophomore year in high school. Not everybody. I guess I'm now an old timer, but people our age that followed wrestling at least would know that I was 86-0 going into the state championship match against Kukla, and I beat him, easily earlier in the year. I mean, it was like a joke to me. Like, I mean, not a joke, but I beat him 12-6. It was not really even a challenge at the time, at least in my mind. I remember being like, oh, this guy, I got this guy. He pins a lot of people, but it's not a big deal. So I beat him early in the year, and then in the state finals, he ended up pinning me in the mills. He took top because he had been training with Sean Bormet and watching tape and doing all the things that probably I should have been doing, and not taking, because he was my number one competitor at the time. So I probably shouldn't have been taking, not that I was taking him too lightly, but I wasn't too worried about it. We weren't doing anything special or looking at, make sure we weren't working on getting out of the mills or anything. It was just like, business as usual. And after I lost to him a few weeks later, I'd heard the name Sean Bormet, and I heard he was a previous Providence wrestler that teamed up with him and kind of started reviewing my tapes and basically came up with a plan on how to beat me. So that's the first time I heard of Sean Bormet. So obviously initially I wasn't a big Bormet fan.
Holy cow, I didn't know that. That's the connection?
Yeah. Well, that's the first time I heard who he was. And so initially I was, like I said, I was not, I was just like, okay, well, that sucks. And so the first time I met him, though, I don't remember what the tournament was, but I remember I was kind of just getting ready to do something, and he came over and he introduced himself, and he said, hey, I'm Sean Bormet, blah, blah, blah. And at the time, I mean, obviously, as I was kind of young and immature, I remember thinking in my head, like, screw this guy or whatever. I don't care about him at all. Like, he's the reason that I lost in my state finals match. If he wasn't here, which I kind of still wonder, because, I mean, I don't know that they would have had the same game plan if they didn't have somebody, but who knows. But anyways, he introduced himself. I eventually got over it. He invited me to start going to some of the training practices at Overtime School of Wrestling. At that time, I think it was in Tinley Park only. I don't think they had the Naperville location. And so eventually I reluctantly kind of went over there just to check it out. And he's, anybody that knows Sean knows he's the most stand-up person you'll ever meet. So, once I got over the fact that he trained the one person that beat me in high school, then I started realizing he's a great guy. He's a great asset. He's a great mentor. And since that, I got over it and just started training with him. And that was pretty much, I want to say maybe that was my mid-junior year.
How?
In high school. It was probably I think it was the summer junior year of high school, because I think it was at a freestyle tournament that I was talking to him.
How similar or dissimilar were Jose and his practice plans and training philosophies?
I would say they were very different, but it was because they were training different people, and they were the best at who they were training. So what I mean by that is Jose is phenomenal at training kids, phenomenal. And then I remember at some point I got into high school, and he, made some comment about how he's kind of taught me everything he knows, and I just have to build on it from there. And from there, Sean, I think, was a great person to help transition into kind of high school and college wrestling. Not that Jose couldn't do a lot of that, but he has more experience, or had more experience working with younger kids, and was so good at breaking down moves and teaching kids how to focus and doing all the things that frankly, I don't know that Sean, wanted to do as much, which is why he eventually transitioned out of Overtime School of Wrestling into Michigan, because I think he was more excited about college guys and coaching, So I would say the teaching style was appropriate for the levels they were teaching, but very different. Jose was doing step-by-step of moves and have you do it over until it was perfect. Even sometimes when it was perfect, he'd tell you it's not perfect, do it over. And you're not, that's just not how college training and wrestling is. You're not doing like the same drill of the same move step by step over and over. It's just a little different.
Yeah, he was huge on drilling. Like I'd never seen a more structured drill than when you'd go up there, and everyone who was a Martinez kid knew how to do it to a T, and it was just amazing to watch him to go through that. They'd have different series and different. I mean, it was really broken down.
Yeah, and the thing is, I don't do a ton of coaching now, but every once in a while, somebody will ask if I can run a clinic or whatever, and so I'll run clinics, and it's hard, man. It's hard to get kids to focus. I mean, my kid's 5, and he's in wrestling now, and just for fun. And I go there to see how he's doing, and he's doing a headstand in the back of the room and stuff, So I don't know. I mean, Jose had a talent and was able to really get kids to focus, because, I mean, to get an 8-year-old kid to start doing the same thing over and over against the wall in a hot wrestling room in East Aurora is, that's not easy to do.
I know. I always get anxiety thinking, I'm not married and I don't have kids, but if I ever did, like, what would be the first move you'd teach a kid? How do you even start? It's so daunting to think about, isn't it? It gives me anxiety. I don't even have kids.
Yeah. I think it's really just the most important thing is getting them interested and liking it, and that's kind of the stage that my kid's in. I mean, I will never push any of my kids to do anything they don't want to do. I mean, obviously I'll keep them focused and centered on positive things, but I'm never going to push them into something they don't want to do. I don't think that's the right move, whether it's wrestling or playing the piano. But that being said, I think the most important thing, if they're going to be interested in it, is keeping them interested. And then if you find that they're interested and want to take it to the next level, and that's kind of what I tell my son Eli's coach right now. He's an awesome guy. He gets the kids interested and really keeps it fun and entertaining. But basically what I tell him is, at this point, I'm just happy to have him involved, but if he ever wants to take it seriously or to the next level, then that's when I'm gonna, if he wants to take it, where he's gonna actually try to train, then that's where I'd definitely be interested in kind of stepping in and helping coach and things like that. But for now, he's just kind of having fun.
Yeah, and just keeping them interested in the sport is obviously huge. I hate the coaches that try to weed kids out. I think that's ridiculous. I don't know any other sport that takes pride in getting kids away more than wrestling, and I just think it's just crazy that some people do that. So we glossed over.
I mean, everybody matures at different levels, so you just you got to see where they're at.
Right. And now we glossed over a topic that I threw out a post this morning. I got Dr. Eric Tannenbaum on the show. What questions do you have for him? 50% of them were the Kukla match. We got to go back to that, man. We're talking about. I'm sorry to do it, but it's every guest I have on. Usually we talk about.
I figure it's as much.
Man, we're talking about one of the biggest upsets in Illinois high school state history. Maybe the loudest Assembly Hall's ever been. Maybe not though. I mean, there's been a lot of great upsets, a lot of great matches at Assembly Hall. But like you said, coming into the match, you were 86-0. Wrestling 125 pounds, and you had this kid who was like a real gangly guy. And I know Matt, he's a great guy, but real gangly, long guy for 125 pounds. And I was looking it up. In his career, he had pinned over 105 people. So it's like, I didn't realize that. That's freaking crazy. I mean, and like you said, you wrestled him. I don't know if it was at Conant earlier that year, whatever it was, but you beat him. So going into the match, did you have any self-doubt, any question marks whatsoever? And if not, what were you thinking going into that match your sophomore year?
Yeah, I mean, I always had, I wouldn't call it self-doubt, but I always, approach every match the same, which is, have I prepared as much as I possibly can? So that's, as a side note, that's something any younger wrestler listening to or anything like school included, if you're studying for a test or if you're prepping for matches or whatever you're prepping for, you got a big presentation to give, anything in life. I think if you prepare as much as you can, obviously within reason. I mean, you got to sleep and rest and do your thing. But if you work out in the morning and you cut weight appropriately and you're not out, in college drinking late or doing anything crazy, and you've done everything you can within reason, and sometimes even beyond reason, doing even more, where you've kind of pushed yourself beyond your limits, I think at that point then you're going to be as confident as you can be, which doesn't mean you're cocky, but you've done everything you can do, and you just go into the match with that mindset. And that's kind of always how I've approached all of them. And you have, I think a lot of the doubts probably come from people that haven't prepared properly. So I would say at the time, I probably thought I was as prepared as I could be. In retrospect, now that I'm looking and knowing he hired some private coach to look through all my, to watch video and to bring him in, I guess there could have been a couple other things I could have done. But at the time I felt pretty well prepared, and, I think I was happy with how much I had, the margin of how much I won by last time, but the match, his game plan changed, and that obviously changed the entire match.
So what were you doing? What was a typical day for you as a sophomore in high school, one of the top high school wrestlers in the country at that time, even as a sophomore, outside of the 3 to 5 practice in the afternoon? What did that look like for you to get the edge and, as you said, do everything you could?
Well, Naperville North, as our team, I think we had great coaches. I just don't think we had the team that necessarily a lot of other teams had for a variety of reasons. But, what I mean by that is that we never even made it down state as a team, never even made it to state as a team, which is kind of crazy to think, because one year we had 3 undefeated state champs, all who came from the Martinez training. But the coaches at North were great and did a great job. And, I forever am grateful, because I guess, one of the things that I would do is I would come in the morning at 5 a.m. I'd wake up, I'd get in there, which for high school is kind of crazy. Nowadays it's not a big deal, but in high school, waking up at 5 a.m. is a little nuts. And I'd come in and the head coach of North right now, Tom Champion, he'd always meet me in there. He'd open it up and he'd let me go, and sometimes we'd work out or we'd run stairs or we'd do whatever. And that was usually just Tom Champion and myself. It wasn't like the team was doing it. Nobody else was really doing it. So I would do that. And then in gym, sometimes I would try to take gym class, for instance, as a way to kind of either lose a couple extra pounds or whatever I was doing. So I'd actually, if we were doing a mile run or whatever we were doing, I'd really try to push myself harder than that, try to take every opportunity I could. And then in the actual practice we'd have, go through your typical practice, obviously push yourself, typically stay a little later if you can. And then sometimes we would go out, I guess it depends on what year it was, clearly not that year, but sometimes we'd go out and work out with Martinez if there was extra time, or I guess more like my senior year, I would then go over to overtime and work out with Sean. So it was, as much as you can do. As much as you can do.
I mean, absolutely. And there's only a certain amount you can do. And like you said, some of the guys you were working out with were incredible wrestlers. Brian Dyer comes to mind. And I don't know if Charles Martelli was around or if he even went to that school, but for some reason I'm thinking he went to Naperville North. And
yeah, so Martelli went to North, yeah.
Okay.
And then he went to Michigan, and I bumped into him at the last Michigan reunion. He's a great stand-up guy. He and his dad are great people, and so I always remember looking up to him too, coming into there. So it was great kind of having that history of at least at North was such a stud coming out of North and then going to Michigan. I mean, to be honest, it's not like that had nothing to do with the reason why I went to Michigan, but it was kind of cool, and it's great seeing him at some of these alumni events now.
Dude, that book he wrote, my mom got it for me in 7th grade, How to Be a State Champion, and I read that thing all the time. It was just cool that he had written that down. It really was that was kind of ahead of its time. Now there's so much, it's incredible now how much stuff's out there, but back then, if you were from the country, you were like, how the heck are these guys so much better than us in Chicago? But, it was just a mindset, really. But I think a lot of kids from my area thought that and eventually got over it. But at the time, it was cool to see his book on that. And so I kind of figured you were doing something similar to that. And so going into the match, you're a sophomore, he's a senior. I watched it today, and it was weird because the first takedown was kind of a go behind, and then he puts you to your back right away. You're down 4-0. That was kind of surprising because I thought it was just some random thing at the third period, but then you come back and you got some really quick go behind takedowns, and you're shooting that outside double. Then you kind of come to a front headlock and got a couple go behinds. And so, did he choose top in the third period?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because you were down by
I know.
1. That's a bold move, man.
Yeah, it was crazy.
He's up
it's
by
super ballsy. Yeah.
He's up by 1. State finals match of the tournament takes top, and obviously,
that's what I was. That was obviously the right. That's where I would say the training and coaching comes in. That was the game plan. So I think. Like I said, that match that I think if I'm recalling it right, I think I beat him 12-6. It was
you did.
6 takedowns, and I let him up 6 times. So it was pretty routine. It was like a routine match for me. That's how I wrestled in high school, because that was how Israel, Nathan, and Jose kind of trained you. It was all takedown machine. So it wasn't really much focus on top. On bottom, obviously you want to get away, but for the most part, it was hyper focused on takedowns. And then we did a lot of freestyle on that. So. That was the right move. I honestly think if he would have taken bottom, I would have beat him.
For sure.
I don't think he would have taken me down again.
But you think a guy now, it's unheard of for someone up 1 point in the state finals to take top. It's like you take down, you're up, you escape, you're up by 2. It's like, it's just bizarro to see it. And so obviously it paid off, and we don't have to talk about it much more, but I'm really more interested, Eric, in the rebound, right? So I read that you didn't sulk too long after it, and it seems like you had some really high level of maturity back then not to sulk and get over it. But what if a young wrestler is listening to this now and they had a heartbreaking loss, what helped you get back on the horse and get right back going? Because you never lost again in high school. You had 1 loss in high school ever. But if you kind of remember like Sunday morning after that tournament, or even the weeks after, what was it that allowed you to get back going?
Well, it's the craziest thing. So that night, I went and worked out in the Illinois wrestling room, which is, I don't know what it was. I just did it. So I just started working out all night, and then until someone came and grabbed me and dragged me out of there. And then I remember I was just hitting blast doubles on Adam. Nobody was in there with me. And then I remember I went to the hotel, and it felt surreal. It just didn't feel like it happened. I'm not comparing to when, I'm not necessarily directly comparing it to when like somebody dies and you don't feel like it doesn't feel real yet, and then it kind of takes a few days to set in. But that's kind of the best way I can explain it in terms of how long it took to set in to realize, damn, I lost, So obviously not on the same magnitude, but in that way of it took a few days to be like, holy shit, I lost. But then it was like, all right, well, you lost. So then after that, it set in. I realized I lost, and I was like, well, it's not like the first time I ever lost in my life. So just, basically I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm not going to be the first ever undefeated, 4-time state champ. And then it was like, all right, well, let's get back to work. So, what else are you going to do,
Right.
So,
right.
I would say a loss is a loss. I guess the only loss that really matters is your last loss, and even that you can get over. At the end of the day, as long as if you have a bunch of a career left, which I still did, what are you going to do? Let that define your whole career? And I remember, I had multiple conversations with multiple people, my head coaches, my assistant coaches, and Bormet probably talked to me, I'm sure, about it multiple times as well. And at the end of the day, it's like you can't let a loss define your career. So, it's get back on, and you know how to get back to work, and it's the same thing with anything.
Onward and upward. Bormet had a loss of his own that's legendary. He's up by 14 in the semis, getting ready to square off against Joey Gilbert in the finals, and he gets thrown in a headlock and pinned. He's a point away from teching the guy. And he was telling me, he's like, I would stay up and watch that match in the summer, and my mom would be like, that's not good for you. And he's like, it's okay, I'm using it. And then obviously he came back and he put a hurting on a lot of people after that, and he made people pay his senior year. Did you switch did you put more of a focus on mat wrestling after that, or were you still taking him down, let him up all the way through?
No, I put a little more focus on mat wrestling in college. I probably should have put more focus on it, but really, not a whole lot changed as far as strategy. I just kept working hard, but once I got into college, that's when I started building a little more on that. But what I will say is that I've never actually watched that match, so that's where Bormet and I guess, are a little different.
Wow.
I just couldn't bring myself to watch it. So.
Oh man, I gotta say, I love that you had back then. Your look was the double knee pad. That's a strong game back then. And the singlet, there wasn't much going on with the singlet. It was just a navy singlet, from what I could tell. I mean, no design, nothing on it. I mean,
nothing.
We've come a long way.
Straightforward. Yeah.
So
we have.
I heard you were between Michigan and Harvard. Why did you choose Go Blue over Harvard? What happened there?
So I actually kind of sort of maybe verbally committed a little bit, which isn't really great, to Harvard. I don't know that it was a formal verbal commitment, but I almost canceled my trip to Michigan after leaving Harvard. Frankly speaking, I think I was more caught up in just thinking the name of telling people I was going to Harvard than really anything else. And then, I sat down with Bormet and we kind of went over pluses and minuses of everything. And at the end of the day, I ended up taking my visit to Michigan, and it just seemed like more of a fit because I remember thinking, I know I'm a smart person, but I never thought I was going to be a Nobel, I was never going to win any big award in academics or, I'm not like brilliant. I just have, a good work ethic, and I have a good head on my shoulders. But in wrestling, I thought, I have a chance to actually do something in wrestling in terms of something that is very rare, win a national title or potentially go to the Olympics or something. Was kind of, at that age, you don't know what you're going to do. And I knew that I could do something like that, or I could at least aim for that. And so that was kind of the big, in my mind, that's how I broke it down. I was thinking if I went to Harvard, I remember when I was on my recruiting trip, Jesse Jansen pulled me aside, and he was like, hey, look, when you come here, you're a student who plays a sport. You're not really a student athlete. And it was just very different. I think Jesse Jansen's awesome. I really appreciate that he was honest with it. I don't think he was trying to knock Harvard or try to dissuade me from going there, but I think he was just trying to be honest, which I think is appropriate when you're trying to recruit people, because you want to have them on board and know what's going on. And I think Michigan, it's a totally different feel. When you go to Michigan, there's the academic center where only student athletes go. You get private tutors, that the athletic department will assist you with, and all these different things that allow you to basically be the best athlete you can be, but also not fall behind in academics. And so to me, it just made more sense. I just felt like there was more of a support network. And then, Harvard would have been, I think it, while it's great to say you go to Harvard and it's impressive, this, that, and the other, in med school and a lot of different places, what I realized is a lot of the people that I kind of rubbed shoulders with or that were at Michigan Medical School, they went to Harvard for undergrad. So at the end of the day, we ended up in the same, in similar spots and similar situations. So I figured Michigan will never restrict you from anything. There's obviously, it's a great academic place, and they send people to all different graduate programs, and it's a top 10 medical school, so it's not like going to Michigan was restrictive. It just wasn't as prestigious, I would say, or as big of a name as Harvard, at least in terms of academics.
Yeah, but still, like you said, it's one of the great institutions, public institutions there are. But it's a sports school. Like Michigan athletics is like the football team, the big house. They have the sickest colors. That is a place to go where you're taken care of as an athlete. I didn't realize that Jansen was there ahead of time. He was actually one of the first guests to ever come on this show, and I love that dude. That's cool he was straight with you, though, and he kind of kept it real, because I wouldn't expect him to say that, because he's such a competitor. I thought he would say that.
Well, yeah, and he was, for whatever reason, he was always one of the guys, that I remember growing up, and once I started paying attention to college guys that were just a little older than me, I remember looking up to him, because I'm like, man, this guy went to Harvard, and he's a national champ, and I think he was an outstanding wrestler, and I was like, this guy's awesome. And he's from New York, which the rest of my family's from New York, so I was like, this guy's the best. And so he was really my draw to look at Harvard. I looked at a bunch of other Ivy Leagues and this, that, and the other, but in terms of Harvard, I was like, man, if he could be my training partner, that'd be great. But I guess it just didn't work out that way. But
no regrets, though, right? Because then you got to Michigan. You were on some awesome teams there. And when I say that, I mean like you guys beat Iowa like a couple, maybe just the one time, but that's a big deal. And you had Bertine there, who was a national champ. You had the Chirellas that Ryan and Josh were there during your time. So you were with a great group of guys. I wanted to ask you about though the weight cutting situation, because I've read that you came in knowing you wanted to be a doctor, so you're pre-med, so the workload academically was vicious. And your freshman year, you have this incredible year. You beat Eustis at the duel at Iowa. You win the Big Tens. You're All-American. Really a great run. And then your sophomore year coming back, you beat Espo in the All-Star meet. But by the time the year was kind of wearing on, I've heard that academically it was super challenging. And then, two, you were pulling a lot of weight. So what was...
I was dying.
How bad was the cut? Because you were at 149, right?
Well, put it this way. I weigh 190 right now, and I'm in pretty decent shape.
So what do you think you weighed in August coming into your redshirt sophomore year?
Oh, I don't even know, but I maybe like
70.
I would guess 175. Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah, I was hurting. Yeah, it was a weird year. I mean, because I came in, I beat Esposito, defending national champ, and I'll never forget this because Jake Herbert and I were great friends, but I'll never forget, Herbert was at that All-Star meet with me, and he looks at me, he goes, how does it make you feel that, online polling, and all of the online polls on Intermat or whatever, you're the only person that nobody has voted to win for your match?
He said that to you?
Just kind of messing. Yeah. He was just messing with me. I mean, I was just laughing at him. I'm like, it's fine, man. It's good. So, but I think he was right. I mean, of all the matches that people were voting on, nobody voted for me to win that. So the year started off with a bang, and I was like, all right, great. I'm gonna win nationals this year. And then it kind of just went downhill from there. I mean, it was a lot. I mean, that was my worst year of wrestling of any year other than my first year when I think I had a losing record. It was my worst year, and it was all because of the weight cut. I mean, it was the weight cut. It was terrible.
So what? Obviously, it's just a drain on you physically, and mentally. I heard like you would go into practice and you'd weigh in your 8 over and you'd get pissed off versus getting excited. So once you moved up to 165, what do you think changed for you? Were you more excited about it? Was it just being able to feel healthy and refreshed? I mean, I'm a huge proponent of no weight cutting, and I think the fact that you went up 2 weight classes and did amazing the next 2 years really shows that. So, I mean, what changed for you once you moved up in weight classes?
Well, a big reason why I went up is because, I mean, one, I didn't have a great year, and a lot of it was because my legs constantly felt fatigued because I was always having to do a full practice, and then after practice I was having to throw on sweats and then work out to lose the weight. So it was like you do a full college wrestling hardcore practice, and then after that you work out for another hour to drop more weight. Your legs are going to be killing you. So I mean, my legs were always wobbly. I was always, it was hard to compete. And then on top of that, I remember sitting in physics class, and I'm trying to take this extremely challenging physics test with a bunch of other guys that have been up studying all night, and I'm like working out and doing stuff to kind of lose weight. And I remember seeing stars and bubbles because I'm dehydrated trying to take this exam, and it was crazy. So, I eked out an All-American. I think I took 6th that year, which was, I mean, it wasn't great, but the fact that I eked that out was okay for that year, given everything that happened. And then the following year, I came back weighing 192. And I just told Joe, I said, there's no way I'm going 49 and I'm not going 57. I'm going 65, which at first he wasn't super happy about. And, because Steve Luke was there, and he's like, well, Steve Luke's going 65. I said, I'll wrestle him off. And so I think once he realized how serious I was about it, we all bumped up. And I think that was the year I think that was the year that we ended up taking 2nd. I can't remember if it was the year before that, but we all did really well. And I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's okay to, make sure that you're in good shape and that you're not carrying a bunch of baby fat. But if you're ever in the point where you're, struggling to make weight, it's not worth it. The only time I think it makes sense is if you can't compete at the next weight and your team needs you there, then sometimes it gets a little touchy because otherwise you don't start. But at the end of the day, I think it's better to not cut weight for sure. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
Did you cut a lot in high school?
No, I didn't cut anything in high school. I wrestled 152. It was nothing. Yeah.
So you were okay. Yeah, I mean I love hearing those stories, and the fact that you went in there and said, "Dude, I'm not doing it. I'll wrestle him off." So, one of the questions I had though about your Michigan time specifically, and I know we're at the top of the hour here, but how different is Josh and Ryan Torella, or are they one and the same?
They're totally different.
I had Mark on last week.
Yeah, they're
yeah, and he's like the old man. That guy. You talk about maybe one of the best college wrestlers of all time. I mean, that guy was crazy good. What's different about Ryan and Josh?
Josh is very conservative, very straightforward. He's very particular. He likes things in very certain ways. He eats certain things. He wants, the kitchen to be extremely clean. That's just kind of how he lives his life. And it's great. And, his wife and my wife are good friends, and they always kind of joke about it here and there. And then Ryan, he's a lot more loose and kind of like a lot more easygoing with stuff. So for a long time, Ryan was the last of the Mohican, last standing bachelor in Ann Arbor. And we used to we'd go out, and, whenever I had a moment of free time, I'd call him, and we'd go out and do, have a couple drinks at the bar and let loose a little bit. And, but Josh he's a great dude, but he's definitely way more straight-laced, in a lot of different ways. So, but in a good way, but they're just very different people. But at the same time, they're, they're super, super close family.
Yeah.
And I think it was great to be on a team, like you said, with such great people, because we were all really close. We were all very different, but we were all really close. And I think I think that's a huge part of the team too, is like, obviously wrestling is an individual sport, but if you can get on a team where everybody's got your back, and you all want to see everybody else do well, and there's no inter-teammate jealousy or competition, that's where I think people do the best. And there was just never any of that, especially, the Torellas are just some of the most upstanding people I've ever been a teammate with ever. So they're very different from each other, but they're awesome. And then Mark Torella, his my senior year and Josh's senior year, obviously the same year, Mark Torella Sr. came in, and he worked with us a lot, and that's, and he was just amazing. He's a phenomenal speaker. I haven't heard that podcast, but I'm sure he's just awesome. He's a great storyteller. He's a brilliant person, I think.
Yeah, he's very well spoken, man. And he's just like, he doesn't. There's no extra words. I love when people talk, and I'm the opposite of that. I'll say 20 words to get to one thing. He has a way of being very precise with his language, and I really admire that in people.
Correct.
And like, when you call him, he's like, "I'm doing very well, thank you." It's like on to the next. Like, he's no nonsense, and I really respect that in people. Was he like an actual coach, like on the staff, or was he just kind of coming around helping out when you were in there?
He was just kind of coming around and helping out. The funniest thing, he actually taught me the leg series, and for 14 years of wrestling, I never rode anybody. And then my senior year, just by that few months that he was coming around, hanging out in the room and helping out, I was a leg rider all of a sudden. So, he is, I would say he's top, one of the most impressive people that I've ever been able to know really closely. He's one of those people that you feel fortunate to have been a part of your life. Yeah,
and you just like have like an extra urging to get your shit together after you talk with them. Like, that's like, he's just doing it all.
Oh yeah.
He's like a CEO. He's like, he has.
He's a Renaissance man. That's why there's probably more shit that you don't even know about that he didn't tell you.
For sure.
He built homes in Ann Arbor. In Ann Arbor, he, basically was the contractor and built homes in Ann Arbor. And I'm like, how do you know how to? It's like, how do you even know how to do this? He's like, I just do this. It's crazy. The stuff that he's able to do, it's, a lot of it's pretty impressive.
I asked him. I go, what was your edge? Because he was so good. And back then, it's like, how could you be that much better than someone else? Because there wasn't that much youth wrestling going on. And one of the things he did was every single day, except for competitions, he would do, I think it was 100 push-ups, 100 squats. No, 50 push-ups, 50 squats, and then 50 pull-ups and 50 chin-ups every single day. And it might even, I think it's more than that, because that's not, I think it was a little bit more than that, maybe double that. And I go, how many days did you miss? He goes, never. Like a straight face, never missed a day. Like that's the kind of guy he is.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Plus, I mean, I'm thinking about, talking about, the good old Martinez days when I first started. That's not old school at all. He's so old school that it's like he's doing Rocky training, I mean, that's
right.
Rocky stuff. Like you said, that was before there wasn't even a single club. It just didn't exist. You just did what you did to train on your own. And he is extremely, extremely focused, next level.
Right.
Next level of focus, next level of discipline. I don't know. I think you're either born with that or you're not. I mean, even Ryan and Josh are always talking about how he's so disciplined. I don't think he had a beer in college. I mean, just very, very straight-laced, super disciplined. Probably kind of how Cal Sanderson probably was,
Right. Just totally. I mean, and you talk
total
about
focus.
Like the names we're tossing around, though, like yourself, Josh, and Ryan Terrell, like these guys are the 0.0001% of wrestlers, but then there's another level that's just like it's hard to even fathom.
For sure.
It really is.
Yeah.
So
there's probably a couple levels above, but yeah.
Right.
I would say yeah, there's a couple levels above.
But I mean, how many people have wrestled and how many people have been 4-time All-Americans? It is a small number. And to be in the finals, I mean, that's another level. And obviously what you did in Illinois, man, still people are obviously talking about you now and they will forever. But one of the things obviously people are most impressed with when they hear the name Eric Tannenbaum is the fact that you're a doctor and that you went to a legit school, Michigan, did the, carry the academic workload and then went into medical school. So once you didn't have to wrestle and work out, did you ever think that med school was easy, or was it always just freaking crazy the whole time in terms of the stress and the workload?
No, so the one thing that I will say is that, I know there's a famous quote by Dan Gable, after wrestling, everything else is easy. I would actually strongly disagree with that.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, wrestling is tough. It's very, very tough. But med school is tough too. It's a different animal though. I mean, I remember coming out of undergrad and being feeling like a pretty tough guy, and you get into med school and you're surrounded largely by a bunch of nerds, but these guys compete differently. You know what I mean? It's a different level of competition. They don't care how strong you are or how much you bench. It's like, oh, well, what did you get on your orgo exam? So it's just a different level of competition. It's kind of funny. I mean, it's a nerdy level of competition, but if you're a competitor, it's the same thing with, if you ask Mark Terrell, if you walk into his world of insurance sales and the business world and finance and a lot of the stuff I don't know as much about, there's different ways to compete. And so I would say, wrestling teaches you that, but it's not the only thing that's tough. I think frankly speaking, I think that's fairly naive to actually think that if you really truly believe that. I mean, it's a cool quote, but I don't believe that at all.
No, not at all.
So it was hard. It was definitely a challenge, and it was a big adjustment, because the bottom line is, what I can tell you is, in coming out of college, I wasn't arrogant about it, but you do feel there's, you come home from wrestling competitions, there's news articles about you. I was hanging out with Jake Long and some big name people, this, that, and the other, and there's a lot of respect. You go to med school and nobody gives a shit about that. You're like, how'd you do on your exam? What were your board scores? What residency programs do you have interviews offers at? That's all they give a shit about. Nobody cares about the other stuff. So it's a little bit of an adjustment. I think that's a hard thing for a lot of wrestlers to do, is to make that transition, to make that jump from, being a great, and a lot of guys don't want to do it. And it's okay if you don't do it. I mean, some guys do it and they go into UFC, which I would say is probably less of a transition because it's a similar thing, or some guys go into wrestling as a coach, and all those things are great, but to transition into something totally different and take the same work ethic and apply it in a different way, it's definitely a struggle and a challenge.
It's humbling too. It's humbling to start from scratch again. And speaking of Jesse Jansen, he mentioned this when I was interviewing him. This is over a year and a half ago, but I still remember this because it really stood out to me. He's a very successful trader, and I think he owns a business now of some sort, but, he got his start trading with Mike Novogratz, and he's like, it's weird, like the people who are like brainiac traders, they have a different kind of stamina. Like, they can't go to the gym and run and work out for 2 hours, but they can sit in front of a desk for 14 hours. I don't have that stamina yet. And so there's different kinds of stamina out there, no matter what field you're in. I'm sure you saw that when you're hanging out with some of those brainiacs in med school.
100%. 100%. That's great, because that's exactly true. I mean, it's 100%. I remember studying for anatomy, and I studied for like, 4 hours a day. You go around, you're looking at cadavers and looking at all the different stuff. And then I remember the first anatomy test I got, and I don't remember the score, but it was not good. It wasn't a good score. And I was like, what happened? And then I talked to one of my friends that did really well, and he was saying, I was in there from this time to this time. I was in there like for all day, every day. And you start realizing these guys it's a different level of competition with a different level of stamina for sure.
Right.
And it's kind of impressive because these are little skinny, wimpy looking guys, I agree, who, you or I would look at and be like, oh, who's that nerd, or, whatever. But it's a different level for sure. And it's a different level of mental toughness. So
it is.
I think wrestling can teach you a lot of those basics, and I think you can carry it over, but you can't be so blinded by thinking that that's the only thing out there. I know there's all those shirts and stuff that say wrestling is life. I kind of feel like that's actually probably the wrong message if I'm having my kid, because it's not life. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there after that, and unfortunately, if you really truly believe that, I mean, it's fine to wear the shirt, but if you really truly believe that, I think you might get yourself in trouble, or your kids or whoever you're bringing up thinking that,
Absolutely.
I mean, it's wrestling is life while you're doing it.
Right.
That's what it is.
Absolutely.
And then after that, there's a lot more.
Now, I know we're over time. Do you got 10 more minutes, sir? Do you got 10 more minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so, and we always wind down with the question, how did wrestling change your life? So you could put that in the back of your mind, but we are in the midst of, now that we're going to shift full-on medical here, we're in the midst of one of the craziest freaking things anyone on this earth has seen right now with this freaking corona thing. I know you are an orthopedic surgeon, so you're not in the ICU dealing with us in the front lines, but just give me your thoughts. I mean, is this something where, is it overblown? Is it underblown? Are we doing the right things? What's your general thoughts on this whole corona thing that we're all experiencing? Because it's turned everyone's lives upside down, and there's a lot of people who are really scared right now, and I don't know what to think.
So, yeah, 100% as an orthopedic surgeon, by no means is this, we don't have expertise in this. I mean, obviously I've gone through all med school training and stuff, but the thing is, I don't think anybody knows, because this is kind of unprecedented in the way that it's being managed. I mean, I have some concerns about what it's going to do to the economy by shutting everything down. I think if we're able to actually effectively lower the curve and decrease the amount of cases that actually happen, then I think it makes sense to do what we're doing. But the problem that I have is I don't know when we're going to stop. So I don't know at what point are we going to say, okay, restaurants can open. At what point are we going to say you can now do elective surgeries, or now that, so it's just, I don't know how you're going to determine when we can then go back to normal. So that's the only question or concern I have in the way that we're kind of shutting down the entire economy in hopes that this will make a difference. Because in my opinion, and again, it's just an opinion, but if we shut things down for 2 weeks, for instance, like right now, our elective surgeries, we can't do anything elective. I'm only allowed to do trauma surgeries. So everything's shut down, and, say they start it back up in 2 weeks. Well, the virus isn't going to be gone in 2 weeks. So it's just, my concern is that it's just going to ramp back up. So I don't know, I don't know if we're able to shut down our entire society and economy for long enough that it needs to be shut down in order to eradicate this virus. So that's my, 2 cents. But again, I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I don't deal with infectious disease or things like that. So,
but still, you've been through 4 years of med school at Michigan, so your opinion's a lot weighs heavier than most people's. Do you think the mortality rate is actually 3% or higher, or we just haven't had enough tests to prove that? Because that's a pretty important question to me. Because if it's 0.07 like the flu, okay, yeah, I don't really want another 1% more people in the hospitals are weighing that down. But what do you think the actual mortality rate is?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a little higher than reported because you just only have so much data. So, but I don't know. I mean, your guess is as good as mine, in terms of what's being reported and what's not. I mean, I'm sure it's a little higher than we know. I'm sure there's people that aren't going into the hospital that are dying and different things like that. It's hard to know if it's blown out of proportion or not. I mean, having had this never happen, it feels blown out of proportion to some degree. I don't know how much. I don't know if there's, I hope that it's effective in what we're doing, because obviously it's costing a lot of people jobs and a lot of their livelihood, and people are stressed out. I think my kid's school got canceled, is completely canceled until May and probably beyond that. And so it's a lot, especially for people that have two working parents and different things going on. I mean, it's turned a lot of people's lives upside down. So hopefully it works, because if it doesn't, we're going to see the same amount of deaths and then also have destroyed our economy.
It sets a weird precedent to shut things down like this, doesn't it?
It is. It's very weird. And I got to be honest, I mean, I see people, I went to the grocery store for the first time the other day, and there's 1 million people at the grocery store. So, I mean, all it takes is one contact. There's still people going to get food at fast food restaurants, and they're passing credit cards. I mean, every little thing that people don't think about. So it's like, I just don't know that it's going to work. I mean, if it works, I think it's worth it. But if it doesn't work, then it was really a huge mistake to shut down an entire economy and devastate, people's lives to see if it worked. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, obviously there's a lot of experts.
I mean, there is, but I mean, I just think growing up, I was raised by a single mother. She was a nurse making like $40,000 a year. We have no savings. If nurses can always work in situations like this, but heaven forbid she was in a situation where she couldn't work for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it would have been a nail in the coffin. I don't know how anyone would have made it.
Yeah, this is going to devastate a lot of people, and that's my concern. Is, I mean, the fallout or the damage that this is doing by reacting in the way that we are is my general feeling or concern is that may be such a drastic negative impact that it may be as bad or not worse, or maybe adding salt to salt to the injury.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, people, it's not like we're going to ever clearly we're not going to prevent anybody from dying from this by doing this. So at the end of the day, there's still going to be that. Plus, we've now destroyed our entire economy.
And that takes a long time to get back going again.
Yeah, that's going to be years probably.
Absolutely. I mean, and I never really thought about it, but someone like yourself where your practice is orthopedic surgery, the fact that you can't willingly practice is kind of a weird thing to think about. Like, who would have ever thought?
I mean, I'm getting people texting me from all over the country saying, "Hey, I had this MRI. These are the results. The doctor's clinic canceled. Can you tell me, what does this mean, or what does that mean?" And so right now we're basically just largely doing, we're only allowed to do trauma cases. So anything that's urgent or emergent, we're able to do. But other than that, so we're going to have hundreds of cases that we're going to have to scramble to do whenever they decide that we can start doing surgery. So it's kind of crazy all around the world. So
yeah, and like I said, my concerns of not going to the nationals or not going to the Olympic trials, like that's small potatoes when you look at the grand scheme of things. And fortunately, I work at a job where I'm in outside tech sales where I can work remote. My day hasn't changed one bit. In fact, I have more time to do this, so it's actually been a little bit better. But in all seriousness, it's a big problem for a lot of people, and we hope everyone's well out there. And I just couldn't let you off the hook having a doctor. You're the first doctor on the show, and not ask you about it, given this pandemic we're in right now. So I appreciate you putting up with me badgering you there.
Well, no problem. Next time, just ask me about ACL injuries or something more relevant. It's okay.
Perfect. We'll do, man. And last question for you. I alluded to it earlier. The name of the podcast is Wrestling Changed My Life. And the question could be, how did wrestling change your life, or what really sticks out to you as things you take with you to this day? But what would you say to that one?
I mean, I would say the way it changed my life was the people that it brought into my life. So, some of the names I mentioned throughout this whole podcast, just even meeting Jesse Jansen, I don't know how many times that guy's thought of me, but that was kind of an impact, a moment in my life. And Jose Martinez and Israel and Nathan and all these people, and Bormet and my high school coaches, Tom Arliss and Tom Champion, and just all these people, everybody you meet in your life shapes you. So Without wrestling, I don't know who I would have been, because I would have been meeting completely different people, so I would say that's the main thing of how it changed my life, is pretty much who it brought into my life to meet, and then how those people shaped me and created, impact me and turned me into who I am today. All these different influences, the Torellas. I mean, it's just years and years and years of meeting great people. I think there's a lot of great people in wrestling, a lot of special people that are unique. I mean, everybody says wrestlers are a different breed. It's completely true. And if you can take that positive energy from the people you meet and kind of use it in a way to shape you into moving forward with things after wrestling. I mean, like I said, it's great if that's what you do for your whole life. If you're Dan Gable and that's your entire life, I think that's great. He's an amazing person, and he's a great, he's a awesome person for our sport. But there's a lot of people that are going to go on to different things, and so all these different people shape you. And I think that probably to me is the biggest way it changed my life, is the people that brought into it.
Was your high school coach really named Tom Champion? Because that's the coolest thing I've ever heard before.
Yeah, so Tom Arliss was our head coach, and then Tom Champion was our assistant coach, and Tom Champion now is the head coach there. So yeah,
unbelievable,
great group of guys.
In all seriousness, though, you're right, man. I love hearing people say that, because that's a pretty common answer we get. And I mean, think about these absolute obsessive people you meet who are doing great things just through wrestling. So that's an awesome part of it, and I really appreciate your time, man. I've been looking forward to this one, and really glad we got to lay it down here. So thank you for your time, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. I think it's great what you're doing, so I appreciate it.
You got it, my friend. Well, have a great night, and we'll talk to you soon. And all great things must come to an end. If you want to hear more from the podcast, text WRESTLE to 555-888. That's WRESTLE to 555-888. You can also find us on Instagram, Wrestling Changed My Life, Twitter, Ryan_N_Warner, as well as our website, WrestlingChangedMyLife.com. Take care, y'all. Calm. 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 Take care.